Good afternoon and welcome back to Tactics Board. Norwich City return to Championship action tomorrow against Burnley for the first time in 2 weeks, having not played a game at Carrow Road in the league for around a month. So an exciting occasion for Norwich fans against the pace setters in the Championship in Burnley, and it should be a real good test and a real chance to assess where David Wagner's side are. Obviously, they've had 2 consecutive 4-goal wins on the road against Preston North End and Coventry City. So this should be a real opportunity against perhaps a side more in and around the areas that they're hoping to arrive in come the end of the season, to assess this team and see where they really are. And I'm looking forward to it as much as I'm sure Norwich fans must be as well. In front of the Sky Sports cameras, a lunchtime kickoff tomorrow, and has all the elements for what could be a classic. I don't want to jinx it too much. It feels like as soon as we say that, it bodes well for a 0-0. But with Vincent Kompany and David Wagner in charge, I think those two teams are certainly set up to attack, and it should be an interesting one. As always, we're going to look at a tactical aspect going into the game before coming on to my predicted 11, which admittedly is fairly easy to predict after those 2 wins. But nonetheless, there's certainly some good elements to talk about with Christos Tzolis and Marquinhos arriving at the club. That's what we're going to talk about first, and I'm sure that's what's on the lips of all Norwich fans going into this game. If you ask them what they were excited about, no doubt they'd tell you seeing those 2 players in a yellow and green shirt this season. So we're going to look at them first and the impact they may have on the team. Now, this is an example of what the team might look like if they both feature. Obviously, Tzolis, most accomplished on the left, has spent most of his career playing from that side, with Marquinhos on the opposite side on the right. And the key aspect here, I think, is that they both come onto their stronger feet. So Tzolis is right-footed, Marquinhos is left-footed, and they both prefer a situation where they're coming inside to try and have an impact on the game, perhaps score goals more than crossing and assisting for teammates. And that's the setup that's done well for Wagner so far. Obviously, Ono Hernandez and Kieran Dowell have occupied those positions, both on their less natural side, with Hernandez cutting in and actually scoring a goal from that position against Coventry last week, and Kieran Dowell almost a cursory right winger, but not really playing that way, a bit like Emi Buendia did in his time at Norwich, in terms of the ability to come off that side and really impact the game all over the pitch. And I think on the left side with Tzolis versus Hernandez, what that really is just backup if Hernandez stops performing, and probably competition for the Cuban, because Tzolis and Hernandez to me aren't particularly different options. I think when Tzolis arrived, he was obviously an £8.8 million signing. I know Hernandez that summer went out on loan to Middlesbrough in the Championship. So the calibre of players at one point and the talent they were perceived to have was very different, and now actually they look quite close, because Hernandez has impressed under Wagner so far. He's the sort of player you'd expect to impress under Wagner, but he's not a player who has shown consistency throughout his career, and I think that's an issue Tzolis is struggling with, really. He's seen as a player not only at Colney, but sort of across Europe, that could reach Champions League level, and yet he's in the Championship, having struggled to make a really significant impact on the Eredivisie with 20. So it's a difficult one to assess in terms of where they both are at the moment. But I think the expectation certainly is that in his career, Tzolis could certainly exceed what Hernandez has achieved in his career. So on that side, it looks like quite similar options. And what's important to say is that obviously the fullbacks overlapping and getting forward is a huge part of Wagner's system. He's spoken at length about how important that is and how he sees them as attackers, and having those players coming in off the wings certainly allows them to do that. So it's no surprise to me that Norwich's 4 frontline wide options are players that will come inside from those flanks, because the players that are expected to do the crossing and assisting are players that will want to get forward, and those players coming inside in Tzolis, Marquinhos, Hernandez and Dowell will create that space for Yanulis and Aarons to overlap into. And we've got a clip of Wagner talking about Tzolis, who he said actually he felt was more likely to feature this weekend, because he's played with these players before and he's more used to the scenario with Norwich. But here's sort of his assessment of where Tzolis is with his career and what he could contribute, and what Wagner's task is to helping him achieve what he could.
In his career so far, everything went uphill, everything looked very easy, and then you come to England, to the Premier League, and maybe you think, okay, come on, let's give myself a go, and then you think, oh, there is quality all over the park, and then you come into a club which obviously struggled in the Premier League. On the left, on the right, behind you, in front of you, there was not the biggest confidence all over the park, and then you came as a signing which has unbelievable potential. But it's a difference between potential and quality. He has potential, but we're not able to show his quality so far. And it's up to me and my backroom staff to help him, to support him, that he's able to show his quality consistently. And now he turned on Monday when he arrived 21, which is still very, very young. But the biggest thing is he was keen to come here. He absolutely wanted to come back to join us, to help us in this season. And I was very keen to have him here as well, because as I said, if you make a loan, it makes only sense if the loan player gets a lot of minutes and confidence, because he's playing game in, game out, scores goals. And this wasn't the case in Twente. And then I think it makes absolutely sense, if it is possible, as I said at the beginning it wasn't, to try to get him into our training regime, that he gets our idea across as soon as possible, as long as possible, and hopefully we can then improve him and make him to the player which we all together think he can be. He needs time for sure, because he's still very young, but he has potential. And as I said, we have to make sure that this potential will turn into quality consistently.
So clearly a player Wagner sees playing a significant role in yellow and green, as he does with Marquinhos, I'm sure. And he spoke about him actually in that press conference. You can find that video on our YouTube channel. The full press conference is there to watch, and plenty of interesting stuff there, alongside talking about Marquinhos and why he's been signed by Norwich. But the main difference with him and the sort of left wing battle is that he's quite a different player to Kieran Dowell, and although both will come off the right, I think he's a lot more direct and less about passing and maybe more about dribbling and shooting. He's your sort of typical 21st century winger, if you like. He likes to get on the ball and take on defenders. He's a very direct player, as Chris Davison told us, and that's another good bit of content you can watch on our YouTube channel. The Arsenal expert for Football London told us that he may be lacking some confidence, because I think he's only played 5 senior games since arriving at Arsenal. Understandable, obviously, given his age. He's only 19, and the way that the Gunners have been doing this season, top of the Premier League at the moment. So he thinks it might take time to build up that confidence before he can really push into taking on players and showing that confident style that he maybe has previously. But if he can reach that, he certainly will be an asset to Norwich, and quite a different one to what Kieran Dowell offers. Obviously, as I said, drifts off that right and not necessarily one to take players on or be particularly athletic or direct. He wants to find Tamer Pukki and Josh Sargent, really. He wants to find those passes and those gaps in the defence. But Marquinhos will offer something different in directness and athleticism that perhaps Dowell lacks, as Dean Smith and David Wagner have both spoken about in their time in charge of Norwich. So it's good to see Norwich adding those sort of different options rather than just identical options to each other, while retaining players who it's easy to see can contribute to Wagner's very specific and very identifiable system. So we're going to come on to my predicted 11, which, as I said, isn't going to be particularly difficult for you to work out. So we've got Tim Krul in goal, Max Aarons at right back, Androm Bamidele and Grant Hanley at centre back, Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean slightly deeper in the 4-2-3-1 with Kieran Dowell on the right, Josh Sargent just behind Tamer Pukki, Ono Hernandez on the left, and obviously Pukki up front on his own. The same team that we've seen obviously achieve so well in those away games, and I think it would be incredibly harsh to drop any of them based on those performances. I think there was defensive fragility displayed at the CBS Arena. I think that would be hard for anyone to deny after conceding 2 goals in quite quick succession to a team that's very much a mid-table championship side at present. But if you want the attacking, physical, athletic style that we've seen from Wagner's side so far, I think it necessitates having that midfield of Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean with Josh Sargent and Tamer Pukki slightly in front of them. That means you don't have a solid defensive midfielder like perhaps Isaac Hayden would be, or Liam Gibbs in a different scenario. And I can see Liam Gibbs playing a part in this team. But at the moment, with McLean and Sara contributing so much offensively, it's difficult to see Wagner changing up his system to accommodate somebody else in that role who's perhaps slightly more defensive. And if he's seen this team score 4 goals in consecutive games, it would be difficult to justify to that player that ended up coming out why they were. Obviously, that is a little bit of a worry against Burnley, who are very offensively sound and look like one of the best attacking teams in the league, as any Norwich fan who watched that game at Turf Moor earlier this season will attest to. So it should be a real big test, and it might end up being a sort of Kevin Keegan's Newcastle type game if Norwich can't find a way of securing that. And perhaps there will be tactical elements. I imagine we'll see them drop slightly deeper than usual, whether that's through choice or through Burnley's own play, because Burnley at the moment, despite being associated throughout their recent history with quite direct football, are very good at controlling possession now and getting a hold of a game in that sense. So Norwich might be pinned back slightly more than they used to and they'd like to, but that does create space for the counter-attack, which obviously Hernandez will thrive on. The likes of Tzolis and Marquinhos, as I spoke about earlier, may do if they come on as substitutes. And it will probably create quite a different challenge to what we're used to seeing Norwich in under David Wagner. So it's another interesting tactical aspect that we can keep an eye on. Certainly one that perhaps will provide a window into what Norwich might have to deal with if they were promoted again. Admittedly, Burnley, who look like being promoted, if they are, probably won't be competing for the upper echelons of the Premier League, but the task in terms of having to cope with those spells out of possession and maybe soak up some pressure will be similar to what Norwich would have to deal with if they were promoted, which looks obviously most likely happening via the playoffs this season. But given that's the goal in the long term, and everyone's very open about that within the club, and the fans are very open and honest about that, I think it's important to see things through that prism. And this is a task that Norwich could well come up against if they were promoted on sort of a week in, week out basis. So it'll be an interesting one to observe. Certainly one that we hope is entertaining. I somehow can't see Norwich having it quite as easy offensively against Burnley as they have against Preston and Coventry in those recent games. But if they can, it will be an absolutely fantastic afternoon for Norwich City fans. Obviously, we've got plenty of other content previewing the game across our YouTube channel and the Pink and Plus app, which you can subscribe to now for a free 30-day trial. No obligation to pay for it. If you have that 30-day trial and you don't enjoy it, you can cancel free of charge. And then after that, it's only £1.99 a month. So fantastic value, if I can say so myself, for all the coverage you need around Norwich City. And I look forward to seeing you again on Tactics Board. Thanks very much for joining me, and hope you have a good afternoon at Carrow Road tomorrow.